So welcome to our third session in our webinar series around Microsoft Entra ID. And today we want to talk about Entra ID and how it can be used to build a foundation for a zero trust platform. And before we start, some housekeeping notes. Shelley, can you just go to the next slide? Yeah. So the session is recorded, and we will provide you a link with the recording via mail within the next few days. And furthermore, at the end of the session, we will do a Q&A part. So if you have any questions, please put them in the questions panel, and we try to answer them during the session or afterwards in the Q&A part. So with that out of the way, I would say let's get started. With me today is Shelley Hill from Microsoft, and we want to talk about how you can use Entra ID to build up a foundation for a modern zero trust platform. Shelley, would you like to introduce yourself shortly?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Shelley Hill, and I'm an identity specialist at Microsoft. I'm focused on our Entra Suite capabilities. Nice to be here today. Thank you,
Thank you very much. So my name is Mantei. I'm a lead consultant from AZ Consult and specialized on all topics around access management and identity-driven security. And in that context, I'm also supporting our customers with migration to Entra ID and also to build a modern IAM platform based on Entra ID. With that, I think we can go over to the next slide so that I can say also a few words about IC Consult. So with over 850 employees around the globe, specialized purely on identity and access management topics, we are one of the leading and also vendor independent experts for all topic around identity security. And our service portfolio includes some business consulting and advisory, also system integration and custom implementations in that area, as well as support and operation. And beside of that, we also offer identity and access management as managed service. And with that, I would like to hand over to you, Shelley, again to tell us more about Entra ID.
Thanks, Ben. So I just wanted to start by setting the context that Entra itself is a product family, and it encompasses all of Microsoft's identity and access capabilities. So it's bringing all of our capabilities for our identities under this one umbrella of Entra, with the goal of enabling our customers to create a zero trust foundation that will securely connect any trustworthy identity with anything from anywhere. And so all of the products in the Entra suite are very, very deeply integrated, and they're working together to help protect your workforce identities, your devices from anywhere, secure access to any data or apps or resources, whether we're talking about in the cloud, the internet, or private networks, even to on-prem file shares. Is essentially Entra is converging identity and network access controls into a single policy engine. So that's what we're going to talk about today. And what that does, it enables you to enforce policies at both the identity layer and the network layer. So in previous webinars in this series, this was discussed. So if we look at the left-hand side here, we're setting the zero trust foundations with onboarding users into the environment. I believe that those previous webinars discussed provisioning those users from any system of record. Typically, it's an HR management system, and then that system of record will then be the authoritative source for those identities. So if, for example, somebody were to leave the company, then that information will flow from the HR system into Microsoft Entra and then trigger a leaver workflow. The second pillar also covered it in one of the earlier webinars, is about governing your user access. So with governing access, you looked at automation, both in providing access as well as removing that access when users no longer need it, and also providing self-service capabilities so that users can easily and quickly request access when it's required. So in this webinar today, we are looking at this third pillar. So we're looking at securing user access to any resource. So here we're looking at using adaptive risk-based policies as well as providing secure tunnels to any resource. And the way we do this is with conditional access. So if we start with conditional access, because I think this is the starting point, is that it's the unified access policy engine. It's that heart of Microsoft's zero trust architecture. So conditional access is a very critical component of zero trust deployments. It's checking numerous conditions. It's checking location, endpoint context, the user and sign-in risk. But often what we see is that organizations have adopted a modern networking solution to enforce other conditional access policies on the network layer. So usually you have different teams managing those policies. So you have the identity policy, you have the network policies, and often we're talking about different solutions enforcing these policies. So when that happens, we see that there's conflict, there can be gaps, and it can be really hard for those teams to coordinate really well with each other. And it can obviously leave some access points less protected than others. So with Entra, by converging this approach, we're enabling that one unified policy that will reason over identities and endpoints and networks together. And so to talk a little bit more about this, converging those identity and network access controls also makes it possible to extend continuous access evaluation to any application. Have a user that has a change in access conditions, that will revoke that active user session for any app or resource. So it's extending the unified zero trust access policies to web traffic, for example, any app, including your legacy on-prem resources or cloud apps that aren't yet integrated into single sign-on. So for example, if you have shadow IT apps, and one of the most important signals that I want to talk about here is the risk signal. So if a user is a high risk, then you can mitigate against this by blocking access. And what's really cool about this is that when you use risk-based conditional access, you can see the impact of all protections that you deploy in this identity protection dashboard. So this chart that you're seeing on this dashboard now, it's showing all of the blocked threats that were remediated in real time and didn't become security incidents. So identity protection, you may already be familiar with it. If you go into your Entra portal and have a look, you might be able to see, if you have it enabled, you should be able to see your users with high risk. But what it's actually doing is using machine learning to detect user risk and user session risk for every sign-in request. So that makes it possible for you to define policies that enforce different controls for different risk levels. And it's a really important part of a zero trust approach because it's identifying anomalous user behavior and it's allowing you to mitigate an identity takeover in real time. So you can enforce, moving on from that, so you can enforce, so if you did have, let's say, a user is flagged as having a high risk, then you can use that to step up enforcement, essentially. So when we look at enforcement, we have options where we can enforce MFA in a highly targeted and very adaptive way. So instead of applying MFA universally, you can define policies that will only require MFA when the risk or the context justifies it. So for example, you might create a policy that requires MFA when a user signs in from outside of a trusted location, maybe when they use an unmanaged device, or if they're accessing sensitive applications like Salesforce or SharePoint, for example. Now, these policies are built using the conditions like user groups. It's looking at device state, location, sign-in risk that I've been mentioning, and an app sensitivity. So once the conditions are met, then you can enforce controls like requiring MFA, you can block access, or you can even require a compliant device. So this approach really helps to balance security with the user experience. You don't necessarily want MFA on every single access request. So when you're balancing the user experience with this, ensuring you essentially ensure that MFA is applied where it matters most, but without creating unnecessary friction for the end users. Benjamin, would you like to talk a little bit more about this and about MFA options?
Yeah, so maybe one point to add here is also that it's not only during the sign-in where the policies are evaluated, it's really every time the user is forwarded, for example, to Entra for single sign-on or so, it's evaluated, and if it's supported by the application, it's even every time the user accesses the application, you have continuous access evaluation that checks more or less in real time if you're on risk or if the conditions are still met.
Yeah.
So with that, going over to the authentication options shortly in Entra ID. So that is more or less this conditional access. You can say instead of just allow the user to access, you can use required as a prerequisite that the user can access a resource, and that, as Shelley said, can be some kind of multi-factor authentication. And in Entra, you have different options for that. So very basic authentication in Entra would be password-based, and passwords on the one hand easy to use, but also easy to use wrong. For example, like use too simple passwords or reusing passwords in different sites. And it's therefore you have a lot of attacks trying to steal the password of a user. So for example, password spray attacks or using leaked credentials or the phishing mails I would say everyone knows. And a way to secure the password a little bit better is to use a second factor. Therefore, Entra offers simple factors like SMS or voice, where you then get a one-time password that you have to enter in addition to your password. But also that methods are not so secure anymore because for attacks like SIM swapping or social engineering, it's easy to break the MFA methods. Therefore, you have even better MFA methods on Entra ID. So for example, the push authentication in the authenticator. I assume more or less everyone who uses Entra in the company will know the push authenticator. And beside of that, you also have support for one-time passwords. So that could be soft tokens, also generated in Authenticator or third-party apps like Google Authenticator, for example, or the good old hardware tokens, for example, from RSR, where also one-time password is generated, and in addition to your password, you have to enter the one-time password. But even that stronger MFA factors are vulnerable to special attacks. So for example, if you think about man in the middle or adversary in the middle attacks, there it's possible that the user enters the second factor together with his password on a malicious site instead of the site he wants to enter the credentials. And therefore, the best way is just to try to replace traditional passwords with cryptographic key pairs. So for example, that is possible with passkeys in Authenticator, or Windows Hello for Business is based on that approach. That's also a FIDO2 based approach. Or FIDO2 security keys, that could be USB keys or NFC cards, something like that, or the good old certificate-based authentication. And the idea behind that is that you not rely anymore on a shared secret between the user and the service, but on cryptographic key pairs and more or less a challenge response method to securely identify the user. As for passwordless, it's more or less the de facto standard now going in the direction of FIDO2 and passkeys. I want to go a little bit more in details on the next slide. So why use FIDO2 and passkeys? First, FIDO2 stands for Fast Identity Online and is basically based on two protocols. One is the Web Authentication Protocol and the other is the Client to Authenticator Protocol. And how does it work? So you have basically three parties. So one is the service, could be, for example, Entra ID, where you want to sign in. Then you have your client, normally running on a laptop or a mobile device, so normally a browser or app. And then you have your authenticator. That is normally something that is capable of storing cryptographic key pairs. That could be, for example, a USB stick for FIDO2, so a FIDO2 security key. Or it could also be, for example, a built-in platform authenticator in your device, like the Trusted Platform module. And the idea behind it is that during an enrollment phase, a new cryptographic key pair is generated on the authenticator for a specific service, and the public key is shared with the service. And if you later on want to sign into the service sends a challenge to your, via the Web Authentication Protocol, to your browser, for example. And the browser then handles that the challenge is forwarded to your authenticator. Therefore, you have to unlock your authenticator normally. That could be, for example, by a PIN or also using Face ID or a fingerprint. And then the authenticator signs the challenge with a private key, and the signed challenge is forwarded or redirected back to the original service. And as the service has a public certificate, they can verify the signature and identify the user. And that is more or less in a way how a user can securely authenticate without using a password and also using a phishing-resistant method, as the whole thing is service dependent. So that means for every service where you want to authenticate, you have to generate a new key pair on your authenticator. So passkeys is more or less an extension for FIDO2 to increase a little bit the usability. And it basically enables cross-device authentication and cross-device synchronization. So cross-device authentication is basically that, for example, if you want to access a site on your laptop and you get an authentication request with FIDO2, that the request can be forwarded, for example, to your mobile device, where you then have an authenticator on. Could be, for example, Microsoft Authenticator with passkeys. And then you can authenticate basically using your mobile device and to the service. The other thing is then cross-device synchronization. In that case, or in the cases before, the cryptographic key pair was device-bound. So the goal was that it could not leave the device. For the cross-device synchronization, there it's possible. So there you have a non-device bound authenticator, and that could be synced, for example, via iCloud to your different devices, and then can be used from every device to sign into the same service. So, and how does that look now in detail? Let's go over to a short demo. So we have basically two demos. The first one is same device authentication, where a user wants to log in to Microsoft Teams from his mobile device. And if he clicks on login, then he gets forwarded to the authenticator. He have to select that he wants to sign in with passkey, have to confirm with Face ID, and then he is automatically logged in to Teams. The second demo is then the cross-device scenario. Also, the user wants to log into Teams, this time in a browser window. And now he gets displayed a QR code that he has to scan with his smartphone. Also then authenticate with the authenticator and providing his Face ID. And then he is logged in Teams. Yeah, so very simple and without providing any passwords. And how can you enable it? So basically a prerequisite for that is that passkeys are enabled in Microsoft Entra ID by your Entra ID administrator. And then it's basically in self-enrollment. So you can open your authenticator app, select your work account where you want to enable passkeys, then click on passkeys, and then it's more or less a self-enrollment process, and afterwards you are able to use passkeys. And with that, I would hand over back to you, Shelley, to tell us a little bit more about network security with Entra ID.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. Okay, so back to this this visual of conditional access policy engine. So due to the integration of the identity and network access controls, you get more integrated capabilities. So with that means that we have something called a compliant network condition. So that means it only allows access requests that come from your compliant network. And there's also other resource types that we've added as well, including all types of on-prem resources and web traffic and actually enables you to apply those conditional access policies to, because we've integrated at the network layer. There are also controls like step-up authentication for specific on-prem apps, or maybe you want to provide just-in-time access to external storage sites for specific user groups. So bringing together the identity and network layer into this policy engine enables you to use those signals and the enforcement capabilities on a whole new level, because you're able to enforce them on that network layer. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about how we actually do that. And there are two products that are how we extend risk-based conditional access to web traffic and to on-prem apps. And those two products are Entra Internet Access and Entra Private Access. Now, Entra Internet Access is an identity-centric secure web gateway that protects employees from the threats of the open internet. It basically filters out non-compliant content, and it enforces conditional access policies on SaaS apps and internet traffic. Entra Private Access, on the other hand, is a complete identity-centric, zero-trust network access solution that enables you to replace traditional VPNs. So unlike a VPN that would give users access to your entire environment, private access enables very granular, modern user-to-resource access controls. And it even works with your legacy on-prem apps and resources. So that means you can enforce MFA on that 20-year-old app that you haven't been able to connect to Entra, but you still need to control it because you have it's an important piece of discontinued hardware. So it really enables you to to put identity and identity security in front of those more legacy resources that you have. And one of the benefits of this is having a unified user access solution. It allows a unified or consistent user experience, essentially, because it enables single sign-on, it enables consistent authentication patterns, and one end user portal to see all of the available apps, including those legacy on-prem apps and resources. And what it does is it means that this experience is consistent for your users, whether we're talking about corp access or remote access or from any location or device. So it really enables that consistent approach. Is one of the big benefits. The end user doesn't necessarily need to be concerned about where that resource is. Now, I've got a couple of demos for you today. A couple of things I wanted to just touch on that may have been touched on in previous webinars, but I feel it's really important to talk about the integration. And essentially with the self-service tools that we have in the My Access portal, for example, it allows users to very easily request access that they need. They can see their group memberships, they can see their security information, and they can self-service to all the relevant identity services. So access packages, which was talked about in a previous webinar, it enables you to provide entitlement management and flexibility in managing the access lifecycle for your employees and your guests. So these access packages, and this is what's running on the screen, is just a quick little demonstration of that being able to request access to a resource and having that just-in-time approach for the user to actually be able to access that. So it's really important just to make clear that integration running through all of the Entra products. And the other part of this that I want to talk about, just because it is also part of the demonstration I'm going to show you, you can embed a verified ID into entitlements management to give you more options for simplifying access while also improving security. So Microsoft Verified ID, again, I think it was spoken about previously, but it is essentially our managed verifiable credential service. You can think of it like a digital staff passport. And when a user tries to access one of your highly sensitive on-prem resources, you can enforce a face check. By sharing only the face check match results to Entra, you're not sharing any sensitive data. So face check is strengthening your identity verification, but also protecting user privacy. And this again can be used for employees and guests. And as I said, I mentioned that because of the demo I'm about to show you now. Now, this demo is really showing that user experience of accessing a private resource, and it's demonstrating that integration of the Entra capabilities. So for this scenario, we have Peter. He needs just-in-time access to an on-prem RDP connection. So his access is actually going to be provided through Entra Private Access. So not a VPN, we're using private access, and his access is going to be time-bound through an access package for just-in-time access. And it's also going to do a verified ID face check. So I'm just going to press play on this. And so Peter's going to connect, and it says he's got to sign in, and it says he doesn't have access. He doesn't have the required access. He's blocked because he's not a member of the group with access. So what he does, he goes to the My Access portal, because that's where you get all of your access from. So in the My Access portal, he can see which access package he needs to request. This particular one is going to give him 1 hour of access to do this RDP connection, whatever this work is he's got to do. But it's requesting that he does a verified ID face check as part of this request. So there's actually not you can have approval workflows, but we want just-in-time access for this. So it's not an approval workflow, but Peter is going to verify that it really is him before he can have access to specific RDP connection. And once the face check is complete, the images will be deleted, and the face check results are being shared with Entra. So once that's shared, which it should be done now, he is also going to put in a justification. All of this is all available in the audit logs. So he's requested it, and it's being automatically processed. There was no approval workflow for this one because it's just-in-time access. And he can see he has access, and it's actually only going to last for 1 hour. So now Peter goes back to this connection. So remember where he's accessing this at the network layer, and it is going to let him in. So I think that's just a great example of how you can enforce security policies across both identity and network layer, and have it add in the all of the security around the identity, but putting in front of the resource that the user is trying to access. So that is one example. The other example I wanted to show you is a very basic demo. So this one is without all the jazz hands and the bells and whistles of the other one, which showed all of the integration. This is a very basic demo because it is just purely showing it's a secure shell, so connecting to a Linux server, and it's purely showing that connection. It's purely showing the interruption by requesting the user to do MFA before they're allowed access to the resource. So before I get access to this particular resource, the conditional access policy will ensure that the device is the security posture is verified, and that the user identity is verified with MFA. So if I press play, and as I start to access the server using SSH, I'm going to be prompted for MFA. Here it goes, and it's using my phone to complete the MFA challenge. So I put in my password, and I'm going to be asked to do the MFA challenge. I'm doing it on my phone, and then after completing that MFA, which should be happening any second now, it's going to allow me to sign in to the Linux server using SSH. And I'm in. So without any bells and whistles, it's just showing that power of the conditional access policy to interrupt a network layer request and put MFA in front of the resource that's trying to be accessed. So you're really able to enforce that risk-based conditional access and MFA even at that network layer. Okay, the next thing I just wanted to take you through, just to explain a little bit more about how this works, is I just thought I'd do a quick little overview of the architecture and just explain a little bit about how we do this. So starting with the Global Secure Access client. So for Entra Private Access and Entra Internet Access, it uses one client. And this is what allows you to enforce policies at the network layer. And users will install this client on their device, and the GSA client is essentially is leveraging the operating system filter driver to acquire the traffic from the device, and it's and based on the conditional access policies that you've configured, it will tunnel the user traffic to the service at the edge. So any traffic that doesn't meet the applied policies, they will be released, and a third-party solution will pick them up if that's a requirement. But it's really going to be enforcing those conditional access policies from the device. So when a user tries to access that target resource, the conditional access policy checks the conditions. And if access is permitted, then it will route the user directly on the Microsoft WAN backbone, and essentially it opens up a private tunnel to provide the user access to the resource. Now, from a private access perspective, to access this resource and to enable your users to have access to your private resources, you need to install a connector on your local device, on your network, that has line of sight of all the resources that you want to manage. So the connector can provide connection to many resources, and it essentially, what it does, it creates an outbound connection to our service in the cloud. So you don't need to worry about opening up any specific ports on your corporate firewall. And these connectors are what brokers the traffic to the specific on-prem apps that you configure, and you configure those essentially by defining IP addresses or FQDNs, and you register them as enterprise applications in your Entra tenant. And the protocols, it's very broad. If you're familiar with Azure AD App Proxy, it is essentially private access is essentially an evolution of that, because whereas App Proxy was very much limited to web apps, private access has very broad support. It can support protocols like RDP, SSH, basically any TCP, UDP based resources. So it could be printers, for example, or file shares. So there's a broad application of the ports and protocols that it can support. And just to tell you a bit more about our secure service edge that's supporting this secure remote access. First of all, one of the benefits is there's obviously just one place to know about and to manage all of the apps across your environment through those conditional access policies. It provides that integrated risk to your network access policies and enforcements. As I mentioned, there's very broad application support, so that enables secure access to any application, including those on-prem private applications that are using any port or protocol. So like I said, the printers, FTP, private web apps and non-web apps, and all those others based on TCP or UDP protocols. Another benefit to this Entra Secure Access is our solution is a globally distributed proxy. So it's the most extensive in the world, and the solution minimizes latency by eliminating additional hops. So users are going to always be directed to their closest point of presence, and then they will be routed on Microsoft's WAN backbone. So it really delivers a great user experience anywhere. And then lastly, as I mentioned earlier, there are also some enhanced security controls for robust protection, superior visibility and resiliency, also for Microsoft apps. So you can just direct your Microsoft traffic through the global secure access client if you were just wanting to route that traffic through our secure service edge. And also that makes it very compatible, so it can be deployed alongside other SSE solutions, so other third parties that you might be using in tandem. So it does work side by side with others very well. Okay, so this really just brings me back to here, and as I said, it explains our unified approach to providing that security at the identity and network layers. So when we're talking about the secure access, this is our conditional access policy engine, enabling secure access to any app or resource, whether we're talking about the cloud, private networks, on-prem, and enabling that consistent access to your resources from anywhere. So you're talking about, it's really about securing access with adaptive, risk-based conditional access policies and secure tunnels. So your things like M365 apps, SaaS apps, internet sites, even file shares. And we do this with a zero trust approach that takes into account the user risk that's constantly being evaluated with identity protection. So that continuous access evaluation that ensures that if there's a change in a user session, that session can be entered if it no longer meets the criteria. So that's our approach, and I think I'm just going to jump onto the next slide now, because this diagram is really about illustrating the key Microsoft technical capabilities for zero trust that enable each element of the NIST zero trust architecture. So it's quite a lot to take in, and there is a lot here. So it's something that you might want to have a closer look at later. But essentially, this is showing how how Microsoft can enable each of those elements. And obviously starting with identity and access policies, they are absolutely critical to be able to enable and secure access to business assets. So those include obviously Entra ID, Entra Conditional Access, which we've talked a lot about today, identity protection, identity governance, and private access and Defender for Identity, which is shown down here, and it just shows how these are able to to match and support those NIST requirements. I'm just going to click on to the next one. Ben, did you want to talk more about the
Yeah. So here you have basically the next pillar from Zero Trust. So basically how to protect your devices. And there you, for example, you can use Intune for mobile device management and mobile application management. So really deciding which devices can be used, checking if a device is compliant, and if an application, for example, are allowed to execute on it. Then you have Defender for Endpoint, basically the detection and response for your devices, the mobile devices as well as normal devices. And then also to secure admin workstations, you can leverage Intune, and also to provide users access, you can also provide virtual desktops. So in addition to hardware, so for example, Azure Virtual Desktop, or if you need a bit better devices, Windows 365. From there, you can go over in direction of workloads and app protection. So, for example, you have the Defender for Cloud apps and Defender for Office 365 that basically can protect your apps and your workloads. You have Defender for Clouds that you can use also to protect different or clouds of other cloud providers. So, for example, AWS or Google Cloud and things like that. And then for on-premise workload, you have PureView for data and Defender for application. And if you go down to the data security layer, in regards of data loss prevention, you can leverage PureView also for protection of documents and classification of documents. And the last one also for IDPs and so on, Defender for Cloud apps. And to bringing it all together, so really having the security analytics and collecting all the signals and so on, you have basically Defender for XDR, everything went into it, and also Sentinel. That is basically then your security information event management system, and also the place where you can orchestrate and automate responses to that security information you got there.
Yeah, and that last click that I did, the green arrows, really this is Zero Trust requires integration to really ensure that signals and context are shared between tools and teams, and that they're adapting to the basically continuous changes by attackers. So the Zero Trust, it really requires that the feedback mechanisms to be able to enable that continuous improvement of the policies and technologies and configurations. So yeah, that integration is really important for that signal sharing.
Yeah, and also maybe one important part just regarding licenses. So basically, if you're already using Microsoft E5 licenses, you get a lot of that already more or less out of the box. So if you, for example, look for the whole Defender stack, that's I think completely included in the E5 licenses. Also Intune, for example, is included in the E5 licenses. Entra ID governance is something that has to be licensed separately, but yeah, a lot of from the Microsoft security product stack are already covered with the E5 license.
Yep. Yes, so I think it might be time for questions, Ben.
Yeah, so I saw we already had one very interesting question in the chat. So is machine learning used to advise on creating effective rules at design time? For example, support users at creating them, or just existing dynamically policies at runtime without human interaction? For that, I saw that just something was released a few days ago in a public preview in the meanwhile. So Microsoft Conditional Access Optimization Agent that goes really in that direction. I'm not sure if you have more insights already, Shelley.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think no, you're right that there is you'd find already there are some, I suppose, some support or sort of recommendations, I guess, within the portal. But Benjamin's quite right that the Entra Copilot, that AI agent, will help it will analyze and help you optimize conditional access policies. So, obviously bringing together identity and network, that means you're going to have a lot more conditional access policies in there, and basically you can use that agent to be able to refine, identify maybe redundancy in policies, maybe just make them more efficient and identify where maybe there are gaps within your conditional access policies. So that's something that's just, as you said, being added, and there's more of those kind of things to come that will help in sort of using machine learning to optimize and certainly refine what you already have there, and even to the extent of, and it's not but not there right now, but even to be able to help suggest with access packages and lifecycle workflows and things like that.
Yeah, I also shared in the meanwhile the link answer to the question. And I think, beside of that, also as a starting point, you have also the templates for conditional access policies in Entra ID. So if you really want to start with it, I think that is a good starting point. The most common and most recommended conditional access policies that you can just enable. And later on, based on that, I think it makes sense to really check them with, for example, with a new feature, how you can further optimize your conditional access policies. So we have also a second question. So any lessons learned or helpful hints in integration, zero trust access or zero trust network access, and how to ensure proper visibility?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question, and there is a lot of guidance out there, not just on the Microsoft website, but there are some Microsoft Learn documents that do have some sort of best practices that would help. But I think if we think back to one of those earlier slides with where it's kind of got those pillars, the onboarding, the governance, the secure access, I think that getting the foundation with zero trust, specifically getting the foundation right with identity, is absolutely critical. I think that it's really important that you know who your users are, you are protecting those identities, and that the access is removed when it's no longer when it's no longer required. I think getting those foundations right are really critical, and I highly recommend some of the zero trust access best practice guidance that there is.
Yeah, I think also in addition to what you had before with VPNs was basically you authenticated once and you had the connection to everything inside the network. And now with Zero Trust Network Access, it's basically a very targeted connection, and also with the continuous evaluation. It's also that, for example, if your user risk increases or if you change your location, that on the fly the connection can be cut off. So you have better ways to really react on the changes on the session or the changes in the identity.
And I've just dropped one of, there's many, but dropped one guidance in there just as a starter for 10, but it's a good place to start because it's specifically on the identity as the foundation.
So, and we got a third question. So how many companies, customers are roughly actually using the Entra private access, Entra internet access infrastructure? And are there any features in the full stack just shown still in preview state?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know off the top of my head the answer to how many organizations are using it, but the other features in full stack just shown in the previous state. So I think with both, with both those demos, all those capabilities are generally available. They're not in a preview state. Yeah, that verified ID is embedded with entitlement management, and I'm 90% sure that actually that's generally available now. We've had that for a while.
So I think we have no more questions. So I would say, thank you very much for your interest and your participation. And if you have any questions afterwards, so feel free to contact us, and we are happy to answer it. So thank you very much, and have a good day.